This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Concern over plight of migrants in Libya as authorities arrest 5,000 in a week. The UN and the WHO ask nations to improve COVID-19 vaccination targets and plans. And Guinea's new Prime Minister pledges to stick to the junta transition plan. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, Britain to scrap tough COVID-19 quarantine requirements for 47 destinations, including South Africa. And Kenya eyes hosting more international sporting events. Zanzibar-born British novelist Abdul Razak Gurna, who scooped this year's Nobel Prize for Literature, says Europe should greet migrants with compassion rather than barbed wire. The 73-year-old, who was born in Zanzibar, now Tanzania, says migrants were not coming with nothing and that they wanted to work. Gurna was awarded the Literature Prize for his uncompromising and compassionate penetration of the effects of colonialism and the fate of refugees. The writer is best known for his novels, including Paradise and Desertion. Gurna said he was shocked when he was phoned by the Swedish Academy to inform him of the prize, thinking it was a prank. The prize awarded by the Swedish Academy is worth $1.14 million. Gurna is only the second writer of color from sub-Saharan Africa to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature after Nigeria's Wole Soyinka in 1986. The European Union is accused of abdicating its responsibilities to migrants in Libya. This comes as a UN report this week found migrants and detainees in Libya have been exposed to violations since 2016. The International Organization for Migration has also reported that Libyan authorities had rounded up and detained over 5,000 migrants since Friday last week. Libya has emerged as the dominant transit point for migrants fleeing war and poverty in Africa and the Middle East. Those who are intercepted are often taken to detention centers. Some 44,000 people have reached Europe's shores by crossing the central Mediterranean from Tunisia and Libya in the first 9 months of 2021. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres have been giving a news conference on the latest developments in the COVID-19 global vaccination rollout. The WHO wants 40% of populations to be vaccinated by the end of the year. Our correspondent Ryan Thompson has the following story.
Well, some of the most important representatives from the World Health Organization, as well as the United Nations, made an important announcement in Geneva today regarding the global COVID-19 vaccination strategy. Because for many months now, we've seen rich Western nations vaccinating and continuing their efforts to combat the pandemic, while other parts of the world, poorer nations, are struggling to really get these jabs into arms. So what they laid out today on Thursday was a much more precise plan, a so-called strategy to ensure that by the middle of 2022, much of the world's population will be vaccinated against COVID-19, and the World Health Organization can begin to look at plans to confront the virus after the pandemic and what they can do going forward. The goal is that 40% of each country's population will be vaccinated by the end of this year, 2021. And then a few months later, by the middle of 2022, that number will rise of each country's population. They are going to stick with much of the metrics that we have seen before, where the older, high risk, and people working in healthcare get the jab first, followed by full adults, and then eventually children. But this has been an effort for the World Health Organization for many, many months now. Since we've begun vaccinating, they've been arguing that it can't just be richer Western nations that can afford the vaccine that can be doing this. This has to be a global effort to confront and stop the pandemic. But they faced a number of setbacks so far in achieving the goals that they've laid out. They had hoped to vaccinate 10% of the population within each country around the world by the end of September, but in the end, 58 countries were unable to obtain that goal, so there's a lot on the line here. They say that the current supply chain is strong enough to support this goal, with 1.5 billion doses being made each month. They will ultimately need 11 billion doses to actually get the job done, but they say so far the funding is there. Now it's just all about making sure that the supply chain and the effort and the intergovernmental communication is successful. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
The World Health Organization has announced a strategy to achieve global vaccination by mid-2022. The global health body is aiming for 40% of the population of every country to be vaccinated by the end of this year and 70% by the middle of next year. Speaking in Geneva, the World Health Organization Director General has said achieving these targets will require at least 11 billion vaccine doses. He also made it clear that the problem is not supply, but allocation.
We call on all countries to update their national COVID-19 vaccine targets and plans to guide manufacturing investment and vaccine distribution. We call on countries with high vaccine coverage to swap delivery schedules with COVAX and AVAT and to fulfill their dose-sharing pledges immediately. We call on vaccine-producing countries to allow free cross-border flow of finished vaccines and raw materials and to enable sharing of know-how, technology, and licenses.
Japan's new Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has vowed to end the country's crisis caused by the coronavirus. It came during his first policy address hours ago. We spoke to our correspondent Phoebe Amoroso in Tokyo about some of the highlights.
Vast majority of the first part of Kishida's speech was devoted to the pandemic response. He's promised to devote himself to overcoming the coronavirus crisis here in Japan. The country has just exited from a state of emergency, but there are still infections and it's now working towards reopening back up the economy. Kishida made a big point to thank Suga and the previous administration for taking a big step forward with promoting the vaccine rollout. Now over 60% of Japan's population is fully vaccinated. He's promised to push full ahead with rolling out further vaccines as well as support for oral medications against COVID-19. He's very much taking a worst case scenario approach, so always thinking that things could get worse. He's looking to secure more hospital beds, more staff, but also to make use of an electronic vaccination certificate to allow people to move around more freely and to help revitalise the economy, which takes me on to the next point of his speech. Very much the economy is in focus. The past couple of years have obviously been a very tough time with the restrictions for the pandemic. Now, Kishida, as we heard in his campaigning during the LDP election, has been quite critical of neoliberal policies. He said that this has led to growing income inequality. He has promised an economic policy based around two factors, as it were: a virtuous cycle of growth and distribution and a new society out after the pandemic. He's promised there will be no growth without distribution, very much again focusing on increasing those in the middle income bracket. And he's also tied this into Japan's carbon emission goals. They've set some very ambitious decarbonisation goals by 2030. They're looking to really develop new technologies, green technologies, in order to help Japan realise these goals, also helping to boost economic growth.
The Australian state of Victoria has recorded its highest daily case tally. Experts warn that the peak is still weeks away. Greg Navarro has more from Sydney.
Well, just within the last 24 hours, the state of Victoria recording more than 1,800 new daily cases. That is a daily total record for the country. The second time in a week it's happened in the state of Victoria, and case numbers continue to rise. Despite those rising numbers, state officials there are planning on easing restrictions, including those lockdown stay-at-home orders. When the state reaches a vaccination rate of about 70%, that's expected within the next couple of weeks, at least by the end of this month. And that's got some people concerned. One epidemiologist pointing out that the thing that's kept those numbers from going even higher than where they are at the moment, more so than vaccination rates, has been lockdowns, keeping people inside of their homes without going about in the community, mingling in the community, worrying that if in fact that's lifted, then those case numbers are going to skyrocket even more. There's also a concern about the impact to the healthcare system. Emergency systems there at the moment already straining with an increasing number of people seeking medical attention. Here in the New South Wales state and in the greater Sydney area, numbers continue to drop. In fact, just a couple of days ago, we reached that 70% vaccination rate. As a result, that is triggering the first wave of easing restrictions scheduled to start here on Monday, including lifting the lockdown for people fully vaccinated. Some restaurants, shops will be open on a limited basis.
To our story on the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, where the World Health Organization wants 40% of populations to be vaccinated by the end of the year. For more on this, we're joined by Dr. Mary Stephens. She is the Technical Officer, WHO Regional Office for Africa. She joins us via Zoom from Brazzaville. Dr. Stephens, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So the World Health Organization has constantly described as immoral the current vaccine inequalities, and yet it appears its appeal for equitable vaccine distribution is being ignored. Why? And yet it's obvious the inequity will have a lasting impact on the socio-economic recovery of most of, if not all of these countries.
Thank you for having me. First of all, let's quickly look at the statistics of what we have as at this morning with regards to vaccination on the continent. So far we have received 217 million doses of vaccines on the continent, and we have administered 153 million, which is about 70% of the doses we have received so far. A total of 64.7 million people have been fully vaccinated on the continent. Yes, so the inequity still remains. We have seen some improvement in terms of the vaccine access on the continent. For example, in September, we received about 23 million doses of vaccine, which was a 10-fold increase from the doses we received around June this year. But we are not where we want to be. But definitely not where we were before. If you remember earlier in October, we declared that about 15% of the countries in Africa met the 10% target, but definitely, yes, the inequity still remains.
Okay, we've had the UK saying it's cut its COVID travel red list from 54 to 7, but with the current vaccine inequality, for instance, half of African countries have only vaccinated less than 2% of their population. Should any country or person be on the red list because of vaccines?
So during this COVID-19 pandemic, one of the areas we saw that was really affected was international travel. There was a point where the entire world was at a standstill. There was no travel. And then when the economy started reopening, then countries started putting measures to limit the transmission of COVID-19 by exportation, or to mitigate the risks of importation of additional cases of COVID-19 in the face of new variants. So our advice from WHO is for countries to apply what we call risk-based approach. So looking at what capacities they have in their country to deal with additional cases, potential additional imported cases of COVID-19, and looking at where these travelers are coming from. So yes, vaccination shouldn't be a requirement for international travel, or where countries do require vaccination should also provide other options for other countries, given the fact that there is a lot of inequity, especially with Africa, where majority of our population has not been vaccinated. So just to ensure fairness in terms of applying these measures, and also provide alternatives in a situation where countries are facing really difficulty with vaccine coverage.
Okay, and so now we are hearing the World Health Organization talking of at least making sure there's achieving global vaccination by mid-2022. What needs to be done to boost a global vaccination plan?
Yes, so there are quite a number of things that need to happen. First of all, if you know that most of the challenges we have, especially in Africa, is with regards to access to this vaccine. Yes, there are some countries that are dealing with issues of hesitancy and all that, but the major problem we have is access to the vaccine. And this is as a result of the problem with access to vaccines globally, manufacturing capacity, and where you have some of those high income countries buying up these vaccines. So what we are calling on the global community basically to do is to make sure that the countries that have excess doses, they are sharing those doses. Those that have vaccinated a large proportion of their country should give up their space on the queue for COVAX to access more vaccines so that they can deploy these vaccines to low and middle income countries. And of course, continue to enhance capacity for production of vaccine, especially in Africa as well. So we can ramp up the quantity of vaccines we have globally and therefore increase the vaccination coverage.
All right, Dr. Mary Stephens, we appreciate you speaking to us this afternoon. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization's approval of the first ever malaria vaccine is sparking hope across Africa. The WHO is recommending that the Mosquirix vaccine be widely used among children in regions with moderate to high malaria transmission. Earlier on, we spoke to Dr. Akpaka Kalu, team leader for the Tropical and Vector-Borne Diseases Program at the WHO's Regional Office for Africa, and here's what he had to say.
We believe that one more child saved from malaria-related death is one child that ought to live. Therefore, even though malaria, we use a series of imperfect tools, the vaccine is an addition to that armamentarium, and we hope to use it to save lives, to prevent malaria. It's a welcome addition, even as we look forward to the future to more tools being added to the malaria toolkit. This vaccine is already being used in some districts in Ghana, in Kenya, and in Malawi. Expanding to other areas is priority. Given supply situations, we hope that in the next 1-2 years, country after country will begin to roll out this vaccine. We want to save lives. No child, no person ought to die from malaria because malaria is treatable, malaria is preventable. Just think about 4 out of 10 malaria deaths being saved. The impact is unimaginable in the sense that the 400,000 deaths that occur in Africa every year due to malaria, most of them, 70% of them in children. We are saying if these children are vaccinated, the likelihood that they have a better fighting chance of survival is very high. And we are saving lives. And that is why we ought to deploy this vaccine as soon as possible. And that is why those of us whose responsibility it is have vowed to support countries to adopt these vaccines, to roll out these vaccines as soon as possible. Luckily, Africa is very experienced at introducing new vaccines. All countries in Africa, we are introducing COVID vaccine right now, rolling it out. It's the same platform that will be deployed because the malaria vaccine is being deployed through the EPI structure. The EPI structure has been existing for 2-3 decades in many countries. Therefore, we are optimistic that the systems to roll out this vaccine is there and that there will be rapid expansion in malaria endemic areas of Africa.
This is Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, Guinea's new Prime Minister pledges to stick to the junta transition plan. And poverty and unemployment blamed for rising number of homeless people in Kenya's capital.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Guinea's new transition Prime Minister Mohamed Bavougui has vowed to create an environment to help the country move forward. Bavougui delivered his first speech on Thursday after the interim president, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, named him the new Prime Minister. The 68-year-old is an engineering graduate and an expert in agricultural development financing and risk management.
Guinea's new transition Prime Minister, Mohamed Bavougui, is a man with no national government experience, but seems to have a plan for Guinea.
We have a mission to deliver, and my government will be composed of specific deliverables. We will be honest about what we can do and what we cannot do. The most important thing is to build the foundation for change, justice and administration. I think this is necessary for the political part to take place in better conditions and for the best to win elections at the end. We are here, as the President said, to serve and to create the conditions and to live.
A transition charter currently in place has also painted a picture of what his duties will be.
My priorities are those of the National Committee for the Rally and Development. They were mentioned not only in the Transitional Charter, but also in the program of 2nd October. I asked the press to popularize each of these priorities among the Guinean people and to help draw up an action plan so that our country has the foundation to become a fair and equitable democracy at the service of its people.
The appointment of the Prime Minister comes a week after the publication of the Transition Charter. It has since sparked reactions from across society.
I think that this appointment was already expected because it allows us today to move forward in the implementation of several actions that are linked to the overall conduct of this transition. As far as civil society is concerned, we welcomed this appointment with a great satisfaction because it will allow us to evolve and move forward very quickly. It is the question of the reform that we are going to propose and defend for this transition.
Some say a PM with non-national government experience is a good bet for Guinea's future. It distances him from the Guinean political infighting of recent years. Chamrono, CGTN.
At least 18 people have reportedly been killed after a raid by unknown gunmen in Nigeria's northwest state of Zamfara. This incident comes as the government says its efforts to end criminal activities in the state have been largely successful. Our correspondent Vili Haza reports from Abuja.
According to victims from the affected village in the Karan Amoda area of the state, the attack went on for hours as the gunmen shot sporadically, stealing goods from shops, animals from farms, and burnt houses and vehicles. The police spokesperson in the state, Mohammed Shehu, confirmed the incident took place on Tuesday but did not give details as to the exact number of casualties or who the suspects behind the killings are. Since late 2020, there have been rampant kidnapping of students and travelers across the state. Last month, the government shut telecom services down across the state and launched a military operation against criminals as part of its strategy to deal with the insecurity situation there. Last week, authorities said over 2,000 suspects accused of giving information to bandits have been arrested. The state's Commissioner for Information, Ibrahim Dusara, says the suspects have provided vital information on the activities of the criminals and how they are allegedly sponsored, and soon they will all be apprehended. He adds that many criminals have already fled the state and insists that soon peace will be restored to every part of Zamfara state. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
In Uganda, there are growing concerns about an increase in cases of child sex abuse, a problem that has been worsened by recent lockdowns. The Gender Ministry warns that parents are neglecting their responsibility to keep their children safe while schools are shut. Peninah Karibe reports from Kampala.
Alice Babire's story is painful to hear. She left home after being tricked by a motorcycle taxi rider to visit him. He gave her money in return for sex. Babire, who is just 16 years, is now 7 months pregnant. But she will have to take care of her baby alone after the man who defiled her abandoned her.
My aunt told me, "Go away from here. I don't want to see you."
Her mother too could not take her in.
My mother became so disappointed because what I did was shaming.
Babire was brought to this shelter by her sister. The shelter takes care of young mothers abandoned by their relatives. She's learning cooking and tailoring skills. Child welfare officers blame parents for not keeping a watchful eye on their children during the lockdown.
Why don't we apply the same strict regulations at home? Why do we expect the schools to do so? I mean, that is a call to families, to parents, to learn how to bring up their children with or without school.
Schools in Uganda have been closed for over a year as a measure to bring down infection rates. The government has announced that primary and secondary schools will resume in January next year, but there's worry that it's now too late and many girls may not report back due to unintended pregnancies. The government says parents need to do more to keep their children safe from sexual predators.
It is clear that many more children are suffering in silence. Fellow parents and guardians, this is not the way we want to take care of our children. What we are experiencing is a failure in leadership at the family and community levels.
The Ugandan police annual crime report shows that over 14,000 cases of sexual abuse were reported in 2020, up from over 13,000 in 2019. Of these, 120 girls were abused by their parents, and there are fears that the numbers could go up this year. Babire and hundreds of girls out there are not sure if they will return to class. But Babire wants to use the skills she's getting here to build a future for herself and her baby. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
The number of homeless people around the world has been increasing significantly in recent years, according to the United Nations. It's one of the biggest challenges that many governments in Africa are grappling with due to factors such as poverty and unemployment. CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports on the plight of homeless people in Kenya's capital, Nairobi.
In the outskirts of Nairobi, we meet Jairus Okoth, one of the many homeless people in the Kenyan capital. After a long night, he is getting set for another day. He lives in this makeshift shelter with two of his friends, squeezed in between a perimeter wall and a cargo container. He has been here for 4 years now, but his situation has hardly improved. Half of nearly 2 million Kenyans without proper shelter are children. Most of them spend their lives on the streets, struggling to make ends meet.
I was born in this area. I'm forced to live here because it's my only option. People have avoided me due to my situation. I can't enjoy the privilege of 3 meals. That's something I can say I have not had in a long time, but this is where I call home.
Most of his friends have gone out to fend for themselves. The father of 3 keeps himself busy by playing football.
I would really love to go back to my family, but I don't have the means. And even if I go back to my family, I will have to meet some of the expenses. I don't have the means at all. They have demands and I cannot provide for them.
The number of the homeless has seen a sharp rise since the onset of COVID-19 in Africa. Many of them are living in unprotected areas, which triggers societal vices like burglary and drug abuse. For now, they're holding on to hope that indeed the fortunes will change even through their menial jobs.
According to sociologist Doreen Katiba, homeless people need more support.
The problem came in when we stopped being one, Ubuntu. So when I am left on my own with my issues, I come to town to look for maybe better life. I don't hack it. I don't want to go back home because they will say, so-and-so went to try and failed.
Improved urban planning can play an important role in addressing the problem of homelessness.
Generally, if we solve our economic situation, when and devolution can be used as also a tool to sort of curb this homelessness, because once you sort of curb that mass exodus of rural urban, where someone in the rural can build his own.
According to UN Habitat, 1.6 billion people worldwide live in inadequate housing conditions, with about 15 million evicted every year. The body has noted an alarming rise in the number of the homeless over the last 10 years. Young people face the highest risk of becoming homeless. Homelessness continues to be a pressing and worrying problem across the world. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
It's 1:30. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Britain to scrap tough COVID-19 quarantine requirements for 47 destinations, including South Africa. And Tunisia hosts the 16th edition of the Mediterranean Building Exhibition.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Britain will scrap tough COVID-19 quarantine requirements for 47 destinations, including South Africa and Thailand. Transport Minister Grant Shapps announced that the changes will be introduced on Monday and called it a step forward for Britain's travel sector. Countries such as India, Kenya and Ghana will have their rules eased, meaning that the inoculation status of arrivals will be recognized. Fully vaccinated arrivals will only need to take a test on day 2 to check for COVID-19. 7 countries will remain on the red list, including Colombia, Ecuador, Panama and Venezuela.
It's obviously a major step forward for travel and for people wanting to travel and for the travel sector, with 47 countries coming off the red list, meaning people can now travel, amongst other changes. We know with coronavirus that things can change, but I do also think that at this stage, with so many people fully vaccinated, both here at home but also now abroad, that things have settled down a lot, and that's why this is a major step forward today.
Tunisia is hosting the 16th edition of the Mediterranean Building Exhibition, Medibat. This year's edition is in Sfax, Tunisia's economic hub in the south. Libya has been invited as the guest of honor. There's also keen focus on China, which experts say plays a central role in reviving the building and construction sector in the continent. Adnet Shawashi reports.
The Tunisian Minister of Public Works, Housing and Spatial Planning declared that 150 exhibitors in the fields of construction and public works from 17 countries of Africa, Europe and Latin America are taking part in this international event.
We rely on this fair to strengthen Tunisia's positioning in Africa in the building and construction sectors, especially the public-private partnership, and to export the services of our companies to Africa and the Mediterranean region.
Members of the Libyan delegation said that boosting cooperation between Tunis and Tripoli is necessary in order to step up Libya's reconstruction after years of civil war. The host of the exhibition, the Sfax Chamber of Commerce and Industry, aims to boost partnership with Libyan enterprises.
The partnership between Tunisian and Libyan construction companies is vital for the economy. Several projects are underway in Libyan municipalities. This international event aims to strengthen the existing partnership and to look for new markets.
Officials at the event said that Chinese construction and engineering companies can play an important role in infrastructure projects in Libya and throughout Africa.
Chinese companies have huge capacity, the know-how and the skills to lead reconstruction projects in Libya. Our experience with Chinese firms has always been successful in the telecom sector since 2011. China can help rebuild Libya with its talented workforce as well as the gigantic construction firms. We welcome our Chinese friends in Libya.
We have strong cooperation ties with China in different domains like infrastructure. We think China can take its active part in the development of the building sector. China is already building social housing in Mali. Malian contractors and enterprises are already working closely with Chinese enterprises.
The Malian delegation in Sfax has presented the project of development of revenue banks in the capital Bamako over several kilometers under a public partnership project. Malian officials expressed hope to see Tunisia contribute to the realization of this project as a distinguished partner. Tunisian authorities say the 16th edition of the Mediterranean Building Exhibition seeks to develop exchanges between African, European, Asian and South American professionals. Senior members of the Arab-Asian Chamber of Commerce and the Africa Link Business Network took part in the event in Sfax. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, marked World Day for Decent Work on Thursday by leading hundreds of workers in a one-day strike. They marched to the office of the Gauteng Premier, David Mahura, and handed over a memorandum of demands. They called on all workers and South Africans to join the action by staying away from work in an effort to push both government and the private sector to fix the so-called economic mess that the country is in. They also demanded issues affecting workers be taken seriously. Jacob Mamabolo, who is Gauteng's Executive Council member for Transport, received and signed the memorandum and assured COSATU leaders of a response.
We are really highlighting the plight of workers. COSATU action is focusing on the following issues, comrades. Fight against corruption, fight against job losses and retrenchments, and stop an attack on collective bargaining, and stop on these budget cuts.
We are here because there's a lot of job losses, a lot of people are not working, corruption. That's all the things that we are fighting for.
Today we want to highlight the plight of the workers as they suffered against the COVID-19, and some of the employers continue, as you see in other sectors, they are resisting to increase salaries. And no exception, one of the major discussions as COSATU, we defend collective bargaining.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has presented the country's 2022 budget to a joint sitting parliament. The country plans to spend almost $40 billion next year, and the government has made it clear it will still borrow to fund the budget. President Buhari says much of the funds will be invested in infrastructure. CGTN's Deji Bademosi has more on that story.
Expectedly, Parliament was packed full for the annual budget presentation of the President. Tagged budget of economic growth and sustainability, the President said the 2022 budget will be invested in critical infrastructure and reducing poverty, among others.
Nigeria is currently emerging from a very difficult economic challenge. We must continue to cooperate and ensure that our actions are aimed at accelerating the pace of economic recovery so that we can achieve economic prosperity and deliver on our promises to Nigerian people.
The key parameters of the budget include oil benchmark price of $57 per barrel, daily oil production of 1.88 million barrels per day, exchange rate at 410 per dollar, GDP growth rate of 4.2%, and 14.2% inflation rate.
Based on these fiscal assumptions and parameters, total federally collectible revenue is estimated to 17.7 trillion naira in 2022. Total federally contributable revenue is estimated to 12.72 trillion naira in 2022. Total revenue available to fund the 2022 federal budget is estimated at 10.13 trillion naira. This includes grants and aid of 63.38 billion naira, as well as the revenue of 63 government-owned enterprises. Oil revenue is projected at 3.16 trillion naira. Non-oil taxes are estimated at 2.13 trillion naira, and federal government independent revenues are projected to be 1.82 trillion naira.
With expected revenue estimated at approximately $24.7 billion, that leaves a deficit of around $15.2 billion. The government says it will borrow to fund the deficit.
The resultant deficit of 6.258 trillion will be financed by new borrowings in the sum of 5.012 trillion, of which 50% will be domestic and 50% foreign. There will also be drawdowns on project-tied multilateral bilateral loans in the sum of 1.156 trillion and privatization proceeds in the sum of 90.73 billion.
The new borrowings will drive up Nigeria's debt further, which, as of September this year, was put at approximately $86.6 billion. Now, the government has made a provision of $8.8 billion for debt servicing in the 2022 budget. Deji Bademasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Still in the country, the Central Bank of Nigeria will launch the e-Naira, its digital currency, in a couple of days from now. That's according to Governor Godwin Emefiele, who told a conference on Thursday. He said this would make Nigeria one of the first countries in Africa, and indeed the globe, to adopt the digitization of its national currency. The CBN had announced plans to launch its own digital currency this year after Nigeria barred banks and financial institutions from dealing in or facilitating transactions in cryptocurrencies in February. Emefiele had said the e-Naira would operate as a wallet against which customers could hold existing funds in their bank accounts, and that this would accelerate financial inclusion and enable cheaper and faster remittance inflows. Samsung Electronics has flagged a likely 28% jump in its third quarter operating profit to the highest in 3 years. It says that this is driven by rising memory chip prices and display sales for new flagship smartphone launches. The world's largest memory chip and smartphone maker estimates its July to September profit at $13.3 billion. It is the highest quarterly profit since the third quarter of 2018. For Samsung's mobile business, estimated sales of 2 million new foldable smartphones within a month showed demand for its foldable handsets. Analysts say that the new phones have captured more of the mass market than last year. Coming up on our series on women making a difference, we look at Nobel, an Egyptian philanthropist touching young lives through her work at an orphanage in Cairo.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Let's turn to a series on African women making a difference in their community. And today we look at an Egyptian philanthropist who's been running her own orphanage and charity organization in Cairo. Yasser Hakim has more.
A popular Arab saying goes, "Success is born from the womb of suffering." This applies to Nozed, who turned her personal tragedy into success by helping the community.
I was married when I was in college and had one son. I used to live a good life, work, traveling, enjoying my time, until I lost my only son in an accident aged 22. Life suddenly turned upside down for me. I felt like life has stopped. There was no meaning in it, just filled with sadness. I decided to turn this negativity into something that would benefit me, my late son Mohammed, and the community.
Nozed built a mosque and this orphanage named after her deceased son Mohammed Raghib in a poor neighborhood at West Cairo's 6th of October city. It's not like any other orphanage. She treats the 55 kids inside like her own.
I consider this place their home. I have raised them as my children. I'm totally responsible for them until they graduate and get married. I have bought a building to provide an apartment for each of them. I am looking to buy 2, 3, 4 buildings to have at least 55 apartments for them when they grow up. I opened a savings account for each of them and deposit a monthly allowance to benefit them when they grow up, either to set up a business, for marriage costs, anything they need.
She didn't stop there. Nozed is also known for helping treat the poor. She opened medical centers in several locations for this purpose.
We have otolaryngologists, pediatricians, internists, gynecologists, and dentists. At the mosque, we help orphans, divorced mothers, and the elderly. We give them monthly financial aid and regular medical checkups and treat any ailments for free. If any of them needs a big operation, we work with the Ministry of Health to take them to the suitable hospital free of charge. We serve anyone who is in need, but priority is for people living in this area. Most of them are very poor, and we know their cases in detail.
A philanthropist, Nozed covers most expenses from her own pockets and her late husband's will dedicated solely to the orphanage. The rest are donations from close friends only. Her dream is to help as many orphans as possible till the last day in her life, in memory of her late son. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And coming up in sports, Kenya eyeing more events after successfully hosting international events in 2021.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment